Well, hello everybody to YouTube lecture number 3. For those of you who recognize that sound effect, that is in fact...
Guess who?
Well, no. It's the TARDIS. Sorry there, Family Guy. No, that wasn't you. It was the TARDIS. And that's in honor of tonight. This is Saturday as I'm doing this, is the premiere of the new season of Doctor Who. And I'm a huge Who fan, so... For those of you who don't know what it is, I can't help you. For those of you who do, you understand. All right, so let's get right into this lesson. All right, the big picture question, it's the same big picture question we've had from last week, but now we're going to look at it from the point of view of the northern colonies. Okay, the northern colonies are going to become the main focus throughout this week with this same big picture question. So again, you already know it. But again, here it is. Take a look at it. The same key concepts. However, in this PowerPoint, I'm going to go back to 2.1, which we did earlier in the week, but we looked at Virginia. And now I'm going to go into 2.2 with this one, which I haven't done yet. All right, so again, if you need to, stop and look at these. Make sure you remember what these key concepts are. I'm going to move along. So going back to concept 2.1. All right, so the thing to remember about what you see here, I don't want to read this verbatim, but it says along with other factors, environmental and geographical variations, climate, nature, blah, 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 blah. What this is telling us is that the North developed differently than the South, regional differences, mostly because of the environment. Because of variations in geography and the climate. It's colder in the north. So one of the things that they benefit from is there's not as much disease. The colder weather killed most of those type of microbes that you had in Virginia. So you don't have the big mass deaths in the north like you did in the south. Although people will die of disease, and we'll talk about that. That does happen. Also, the soil is much more rocky. There's a lot of rocks in the soil here in the north. So that meant that they could not, with the environment and the geography here, they could not have large tract plantations like you do in Virginia, parts of Maryland and the Carolinas. You had smaller farms, right? But a big part of this, the New England colonies, are the group of people that come here. These people known as the Puritans. Yes, those guys. These very, very religious people. We're going to talk just in a few moments about, what that means to be Puritan. Yes, of course, yeah. We already heard that the first time. Okay, so these are strong religious people who have a single-minded belief in their faith. When they come to the Americas, very different than in 1607, for instance, when they came and founded Jamestown. You had that Virginia company, that joint stock company. They're trying to make some profit here. Settlers are coming without really a reason why to come necessarily. A lot of people are selling themselves into servitude. They eventually discover tobacco. And all of a sudden, it's a completely economic reason in the South, which led them to create communities that were very far spaced apart because they need a lot of land to grow tobacco and then other crops. Not so in New England. They came as family units, very close-knit, homogeneous, very much one type of person is coming over here. And they're going to thrive. They will thrive here. They will have an economy that is agriculture-based, but not on a huge cash crop, mostly on smaller, but most of their farms are more what we call substance living, but they also develop commerce. They get heavily into fur trade, eventually into lumber and shipbuilding, and then they become very much involved in fishing. There's a lot of, off the coast of New England, a huge area in that part of the ocean for fishing, and this is something that's going to really thrive the New England commerce. Now, let's look at examples. Now, maybe let me go back here real quick and just remind you that this part here, why this is important to remember, this is where your multiple choice questions will actually derive from. Right? So this is the kind of stuff that you would actually see in a multiple choice question. whereas this is our examples. However, I could still ask you a multiple choice question using some of this stuff, but I would have to explain what it is in that question. But let's again go to this group of people that we're calling the Puritans. All right, maybe 3 times is enough. All right, so they derive from a religious group known as the Calvinism, that comes out of Europe during the Reformation. One of the basic belief systems that they have in their religion is predestination, this idea that God has preordained us before we're even born to either go to heaven or to go to hell, which is going to drive their religion and eventually their politics. Now, as these groups of Calvin people spread throughout Europe, they took on various names. In France, for instance, in France they become the Huguenots. As they go to the Netherlands, they create the Dutch Reformed Church. They're the Presbyterians in Scotland. But when they come to England, now what happens is, remember, England, because of Henry VIII, declared that they are now part of the Reformation because he wanted to get a divorce, an annulment, whatever, blah, 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 blah. So he formed the Anglican Church, which was supposed to be a Reformed church. Now, there's a group of these Calvins who refuse to ever join this church. They're going to separate themselves. They are very ultra-religious people. They believe that God has preordained them to go to heaven, so they're a special group of people. The Anglican Church does not have the same kind of teaching. Thereby, separatists believe that they are preordained to go to hell, so they separate themselves. They will never join the church, which is going to get them in a lot of trouble with King James I. He's going to persecute them because of this. Another group of people from the Calvin faith, though, they say, well, this is a Reformed church. It just stops short of pure reform. So what they do is they join the Anglicans in order to purify it. Hence, this term that develops we call Puritans. Okay, yes, Puritans. Enough! Okay, so these people are going to be a huge part of the development of New England. Puritans are. Good, there I said it. Now, we're going to talk in class on Monday. Now, for some of you, you might not watch the video until Monday or Tuesday, but so we'll talk a lot about the separatists. They're the ones who came first in 1620. They came first in 1620. We call them the Pilgrims. This is a replica of the Mayflower over here, this picture. They write what is known as the Mayflower Compact, basically a paragraph. We're going to read that in class. It's a decade later when the second wave come during what is known as the Great Migration, and here come the Puritans. They came by the thousands, the Puritans. And again, that key concept that then we derive that other point from it, they were highly organized when they came in 1630. They had blueprints. They knew exactly how they were going to build their town. They knew exactly where their homes were going to go, where they were going to have fields for planting, where they're going to put their church, which was very important to them, and also where they're going to put a school. We'll come to find out that the Puritans are extremely, extremely high on education. Very important to them. Now, that stuff all that I just said is actually testable, and I'm going to talk a lot about that throughout the course of the week as well. Jonathan Winthrop was their leader at this time period. He wrote a sermon known as A Model of Christian Charity. A famous quote from this is, "A city upon a hill." The Puritans developed this idea that if they did what they were supposed to do, if they followed God's will, they would be a shining beacon to the world. And that is a quote that is quoted throughout history by politician after politician, as we'll talk about, and often misapplied, to be honest with you. Another, at the same time, John Cotton is a religious leader who writes a sermon known as The Divine Right to Occupy Land. This expression, vacum domicilium, a Latin word, vacant land. They use this as an excuse or a justification why it's okay to take land from Indians. And this is something, again, we'll talk a lot about in class. Now, getting to key concept 2.2 now. Very important to understand. We've been talking about this all last week. There's more than one European power here. The French and the Dutch, especially in North America, just a little to the south, the Spanish, they still control Florida. A lot of rivalry. What this rivalry does is it begins to really affect the American Indians, right? A lot of conflict that's happening in Europe, religious wars, trade wars begin. That is going to spill over into the colonies. Each of these groups are going to look to the Indians as allies, which will change a lot of their political stability. Certain Indians will basically even change who they are. The Cherokee, for instance, after a great epidemic of smallpox happens in the early 1620s, and they see the rise of these European powers, they begin to abandon their own religion. And many of the Cherokee begin to look towards emulating aspects of the Europeans, and we'll talk about them throughout American history. They eventually even want to become American, the Cherokee. And we'll talk even more down the line about that. So you see that certain groups begin to even change who they are. Many of the names that we've talked about in class, I told you how they're just scholarly inventions, and some of these Indian groups begin to just take on those identities, even though that's really not who they are. We say Mohegan and Mohawk like it means something. It didn't really mean much to them, but after a while, it will change who they are, and they'll start to accept the fact that, okay, you call us Mohawk now. These clashes between the Europeans and the American Indians, again, change a lot of their culture and their social value as well as their economic values. Indians want trade, but they're going to be devastated by disease. It's going to take a huge toll on their communities. Many of them will move and go from one place to another. The other day in class, we talked about the Susquehannock, who were in New England, and they had to migrate into Virginia. So they're going to be changing places where they live. They're going to be affected because of the new weapons. Alcohol's introduced. It's going to really have a devastating effect on Indian society. And Indians are going to learn military styles of fighting that they never had done before. Scalping, for instance. There's a huge scholarly debate as to whether Indians scalped first or did Europeans teach them how to do that. The one thing I can tell you is that because of Europeans trying to fight against other European groups, they are going to highly give incentives for scalping so that more and more of it happens. And that's going to really change the culture of Indians and how they fight war. That's a huge problem that happens in their society. Just to give you some examples here that we're going to go through some of these wars. The Pequot War, 1634-1638. The Pequot were a huge, major power in Connecticut and parts of Massachusetts. They basically were the controlling Indians of that area, and they come into conflict with the English there, these Puritan groups. Within 4 years of Puritans arriving, there's already now conflict. It will escalate by 1637, and on May 26, you're going to have what's known as the Massacre of the Mystic River. And that's what this engraving shows. What happens is, during the war, the English will surround this fort, this palisade fort that the Pequot have. Over 500 individuals live here, but at the time the English come to attack it, most of the warriors are out. It's mostly the elderly, women, and children. Now, the English have Indian allies with them here at this battle. The Narragansett and the Mohegan joined with the English because they didn't like the Pequot. And the original thought was they would attack, they would kill the men, but they would allow the Narragansett and the Mohegan to take the women and children and horses as spoils of war. The English instead decide to set this place on fire and massacre everyone in the fort. It's the beginning of genocide in America, and it's something that's going to be a continuing theme in Indian wars, this concept that it's okay to massacre whole villages. Here we see 40 years later, King Philip's War. We're going to talk about who Metacomb was. He is the Indian that the English call King Philip. Oh, I should tell you that Metacomb took the Christian name Philip, and the English made fun of that and called him King Philip. This is going to be a major war. In fact, there are a lot of historians who feel this is one of the single greatest wars in American history. And I'll give you some statistics in class to show the ratio of death during this war. Even though it's only in the New England area, the ratio of death is one of the highest ratios of death in any war America participated in, including the Civil War. This is a massive war that takes place where the Indians try one last time. To rid themselves of the English colonists. And in the end, the English will win and basically crush whatever resistance is left in the New England area. Now, for further reading and further understanding of what I talked about here again in our book, you want to go to these pages. First of all, to learn about the Protestant movement, you want to start with the subtopic Protestant movement, so you understand what I'm talking about. And then I want you to skip ahead to page 58 and 62 and look at Puritan New England. Very important. Now, this PowerPoint presentation is due Wednesday. Make sure you have it because I want to be able to discuss in class these two individuals, Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson, and why they're important. I'm not going to tell you now. Hopefully you'll read this, you'll do the video logs, and then you'll be ready to discuss this in class on Wednesday. All right, everybody. All right, I'm ready for Doctor Who tonight. Bye-bye.